fear. That was interesting, and I'm glad. I'm so grateful that I was able to see that. And so just think about it. I mean, you know, how many have ever been out on the sea? I mean, if you're on a boat, let me ask you a question. Is it quiet or is it loud? Duh. Of course it's loud. It's loud. It's noisy. And Jesus is asleep. Totally undisturbed. Now, in a boat, the boats of their size, and if you understand this storm, this is not just your average little storm. This is something else. This is fierce, violent. This is a very temperature. This is just, it's loud, it's rocking, there's water in the boat, and what's Jesus doing? He's asleep. He's in the back. And so the Greek here is pretty cool to understand it. And that's what Mark's doing. Mark is just contrasting Jesus with his disciples. And I love it. I love it. Now, and there's a couple of other things that I wanted to mention, but I need to hurry here. Thirdly, the storm reveals the real enemy. Okay? The storm reveals the real enemy, and I think I learned that when Jesus says certain things to his disciples after they wake him up. And we know what he says. It was their fear or their phobia, their frightfulness. And all of that was a result of what? Their lack of faith. Now, we all know, like I said, there are phobias, and there's our real phobias. And a lot of people in this world have phobias. Now, how many have the fear of heights? Okay? A lot of people have the fear of heights. Now, I used to work, of course, as you know, as a painter. I worked for a company called Dyson Paul, and we did some work for Piper Aircraft in Lakeland, Florida, where, as you know, I live. And I remember being up in a bucket, and it was my job we were using some epoxy resins and some different things, because, as you know, when steel rusts, you need primers and you need intermediate coats, and then you have your finished coat. But anyway, so I was working by myself in this bucket, and of course I'm operating. Now I'm way up. By the way, I'm probably maybe 50, 60 feet up in the air, because I'm doing this big, like a water tower. And I don't know why I was alone, which was not a very good idea. But there I was, way up there, and I remember operating the boat because I'm moving it around. And I remember, because at the base of this thing, it was a little hilly. And I remember when I'm operating the crane, the bucket, I got the wheels, as you can imagine, when you get two wheels up on that little hill, well, what happens? Well, it shifts, and literally scared me to death. Now, ever since that time, plus I'm almost 60 now, I have somewhat of a fear of heights. When I was young, of course you all know this, when you're young you're not afraid of anything. But the older I get, I have my phobias just like you. So how many have a fear of snakes? I got my hand up first. How about spiders? Okay, snakes, spiders, and you already raised your hand about the fear of heights. Anybody else afraid of something? How many afraid of water? How many can't swim? Okay, okay, quite a few. Okay, fear of water. How about fear of fire? Okay, yeah, see, I would rather drown. I would rather drown than I would to die in a fire. That's just the way, that's me. I would much rather just drown, because drown is a little bit more peaceful. I mean, you just close your eyes and you're gone. But can you imagine the pain of fire? So anyway, so phobias. And this is what we're seeing here. This is their phobia. These guys are afraid. They're fearful. And what gets me is, these are expert sailors. These are fishermen. They should be accustomed. They should be used to this. But this is why it's important that we understand this is not your average storm. This is quite something else that they've had to endure and put up with. So the storm reveals the real enemy. And the real enemy, according to Jesus, is their lack of faith. Okay? Now, because I'm out of time, I'm going to move on real quick to number 4. The storm, and I love this, drives us to Jesus. And we see that. We see that. I mean, the fact that these men turned to Jesus for help, to me is, it's not astonishing, but it's natural because He is their master, He is their teacher, and plus they should have by now seen what He's capable of doing, right? And so they turned to Jesus, and it just seems to be that they're just completely at the end of the rope here. They're out of resources. They don't know what else to do, and so in this storm for them, they turn to Jesus. And I think there's a valuable lesson here for a lot of us, that during our storms, that's exactly what we need to do. We need to turn to Jesus. But oftentimes, people do not. People look to other things for the answers, and that's sad. But the storms in our lives should drive us to Jesus. Not away from Jesus, not away from the church, not away from Bible reading, not away from prayer, but it should draw us closer, because it's in that storm, or in that path of our faithfulness and obedience, that's where you find Jesus. Because He says, I care for you. Cast all your anxieties. And that's what panic is. People study panic attacks and other kind of fears and phobias that people have. When you have that fear, Jesus is where you want to go. Because He will provide and He will take care of it, just like He did here. So, storms will drive us to Jesus, because He is our only hope. Acts 4:12 makes that very. There is no other name given among men whereby we must be saved. Jesus is our only hope. There is no other. So that's what the storm does. I thought about this, and actually I learned this because I read this somewhere. I think somebody's right on here, when they said that anything that causes us, or anything that makes us pray, is a blessing. I like that, and that's absolutely correct. So I trust and pray that your storms will drive you to Jesus. They'll even drive you to your knees, and they will make you cry out to the Lord thy God and serve Him, and pray for strength and for courage and help, and He'll be there for us. So pray that our storms drive us to Jesus, because what happens, as we notice in this story, He will calm. All 3 writers, right? All 3 writers make that statement. And there was great calm. You know, right now in America, as you well know, look at our economic crisis. Look at our economy. Look at the foreclosures. Look at the unemployment. What's unemployment right now? 9.1 or something like that? It's still pretty high. Okay? But can you imagine the stress, the tension, and the panic level of people, because life is just not what it ought to be, according to a lot of people. But how about for the Christian? When we lose our job, when you get fired, when you get laid off, when you don't make that money that you've been accustomed to making, you know, when you lose somebody, you know, when the doctor said, I'm sorry, but you have cancer. Oh, I'm sorry, but I need to tell you that we just found your... That's the sad reality of life. The storms of life. And the only answer to any of those storms is the Lord Jesus Christ. And at least these disciples recognized that, because they went to Jesus and they understood that He was the one who would help them. He was their only hope. And then lastly, number 5, the storm, and this is, the storms in our lives always reveal something new about Jesus. Now, I don't know about you, and we certainly don't have time to talk about this, but as you have went through your storms, have you learned anything, something new about Jesus, maybe that you never knew before? Or have you learned something new about the aspect of faith and believing and trusting